So, well, if you, are you ready, Mitch?
I am.
Okay, so I pass you the mic.
Couldn't do anything about them, but I knew I could make a remote control to turn them all off. So I did, and it became popular. And since 2004, this is the only way that I've made money on this project that I love. Me and 12 people have made a living on this project since 2004. So that's like almost 17 years now. And I started making, and it's open source. I share that freely with everyone, and yet I make a living on it. And I also make a lot of kits, bags of parts with a board, and people can learn to solder and make cool things with electronics. And I do workshops with these, and they're all, of course, open source as well. I also started one of the early hacker spaces. That was the only name back then. Now they're quite often called maker spaces because people are afraid of the word hacker. But hackerspace I like because it was the original word and it's meaningful for me. Noisebridge in San Francisco, incredible community. And it's so cool that it became an example for the thousands and thousands of hacker spaces to follow all over the world. Including in Lyon. And I became internet famous for doing TV Be Gone, and I got invited to give lots and lots of talks all over the world. And when I give a talk, I quite often, pretty much always, find a local hackerspace or people wanting to start one and do workshops there for free. And up in the upper left is one that was called what was that? Laboratoire Ouvert Lyon, I think. Is that right? So yeah, and then in the upper right corner is the most recent one in Mumbai at Artists or at Makers Asylum. And then the pandemic happened, and here we are, only online. So, and down below are just very, very, very few of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of workshops I've done around the world. So, people, that's us. We've been around on this planet for 300,000 years. We have a long history here, and we've done a lot of cool things. We've done a lot of stupid things, and along the way, we've learned a lot, and some of it has been pretty cool wisdom. Some of it is called wisdom and is not so cool. But even the cool stuff over time changes, and we stop paying attention to it, and it becomes merely conventional, or we just follow it even though it doesn't make sense anymore. And because of that, if we keep following just that old wisdom, things get worse. We need to continually come up with new wisdom in order to be relevant for where we are here now. And not only that, but a lot of the old wisdom has caused serious problems on our planet. We all know about climate change. We don't know how long we have to convince the planet to continue to support us and other life forms, but it's not a lot of time. As the world gets hotter, there's more disease. Perhaps that's part of what we're dealing with now, who knows? We have serious pollution, lack of water. Even here in Germany, there are cities that ran out of water last summer. There's increasing disparity in income. According to Thomas Piketty, a very prominent economist from France, who's well respected, says that soon there will be only 0.1% of the entire population owning 98% of all of the wealth. That leads to a very unstable social situation. And not only that, but there's less and less jobs, and there's more and more people, meaning that people won't have enough money for food, which makes people very angry, which also leads to a very unstable social situation. And when things are very unstable, especially with a nuclear threat, war is what's happening, and none of us seem to want that, especially with the nuclear threat. So we really need to start thinking of new ways of doing things in order to solve these problems facing us, serious problems. We often turn to technology to try to solve our problems. And when we think of technology, we usually think of electronics and high tech, but technology really is just tools. Simple tools, complex tools, all sorts of tools. We share them with each other to try to make our lives better and maybe even easier. But technology is always based on the technology before it. It never comes out of nowhere. Simple tools lead to more simple tools, which lead to more complex tools. And the technology that we think of today is based on those. It gets more complex and more interesting and more powerful. And then the technologies that we're coming up with today are even more powerful and more complex than the technologies before, and it goes up exponentially. So I'm going to ask a few questions for which there are no easy or right and wrong answers through my talk. And these are just to ponder. And I'll give my answers, and I'm not saying that I am right. I've given a lot of thought through my getting to be a long life on our planet. But that doesn't mean I'm right. It just means I've put a lot of thought and I've come up with my own ways of thinking and my own ways of presenting. With my talk, I'm hoping that you can come up with maybe new ways of thinking on your own. And even if they disagree with mine, that's totally okay. I'm not right, I'm just one person. But I have put a lot of time and thought into this, so hopefully it's relevant for you. But here's my first question. Does technology change the world? Well, this is one question where there actually is an answer, and the answer is, of course, everything changes the world. Everything you do, everything we all do changes the world. Maybe just a little, maybe a lot. We don't know until we try it. But everything we do changes the world, and when technology is powerful and we make use of it, it can make a big change in the world. It can make a change for the better, like making music. Well, depending on the kind of music, you might disagree if it's making it better or not. But it can definitely make the world better or worse. In fact, technology has caused all of those major problems that I showed earlier. And so much technology has been created for making war, which is definitely not making the world a better place. Well, here's another question. Can we use new tech, to solve the problems caused by the tech before? Well, maybe. I don't know, perhaps. But the problem is, when we create new tech, it is more complex, it is more powerful, and it has unintended consequences, which is usually what causes the problems of the old tech. But since it's new tech with more complexity, more power, it probably causes more interesting, more difficult unintended consequences. And then we'll have to make new tech, which is more powerful enough to solve the problems of the tech that we created. And this probably doesn't end well. But we have to try. What else is there to do? So at the beginning of our species on the planet, maybe 300,000 years ago, we survived not because we're big and strong like these creatures, but because we have big brains, and we came together in community to support each other, usually creating and sharing tools to make our lives better and easier. And since we survived with the need for community still with us. We still need to feel part of something bigger than ourselves in order to feel like our lives are way worthwhile. We really do. And we need community also, because even though we can do a lot on our own, we can do so much more together. And we need to come together to solve the serious problems, big and small, facing us. Because we need community, we look for it where we can. Some of us are lucky enough to have community in our family. Others of us, it might look more like this, or worse. Places of worship can provide great community at its best, but at its worst, it can be incredibly, incredibly horrible. School at its best, perhaps l'école LDLC is one of the exceptions, but unfortunately, they're exceptions. School could be a great community where we share and learn and teach with one another and make our lives better, but too often it's people competing, taking tests which are meaningless. At work, at its best, could be community too, but unfortunately it's people sitting alone doing tasks that they find are meaningless, only to make money so they can buy food and have a place to live. TV is a technology that promised to bring people together, to show people the world, when in fact it's just people, even if they're together, feeling alone, staring at a screen, isolated from one another. Putting people in the perfect state to manipulate them into buying stuff they don't even want or need. And now that we have little screens that we carry everywhere with each other that promise to connect us, and it does, but it also puts us in a state where we're all sitting together alone, staring at little screens, putting us into an even better state to manipulate us to buy stuff we don't want or need, and manipulating us into competing with one another and fighting with one another, when in fact we have so much more in common than the differences, and we only focus on the differences because that's what makes so-called social media make money, is our engagement in this way. Why does this happen? A big reason is because of the social context that exists within which these technologies are put out into the world. That context makes sure that certain ways of using technology will be used and others will rarely be used. This is the cultural context within which we live, within which our technologies are put into the world. And this is really important because all of us are creating tools, creating technology that we will be putting into the world with our good intent, but that doesn't mean that it will be used in the ways we foresee. It will be used in ways that are good, that are utilized in the cultural context. We need a positive social context for our creative output to be used to help ourselves and those around us, so that we can make our lives and the lives of those around us and the world a better place. And in my view, community and hacking are key. Hacking has lots of definitions. The word was created in MIT in 1953 before computers. It has nothing to do with computers, at least in the definitions I like. So here's my definition. It's a way of seeing the world. We see the world as full of resources, and we can use those resources any way we want to improve our projects, whatever those projects may be. And then we share it with others. And this is what hacking is all about. And we do it because it's an incredibly enjoyable thing to do. It's a way of living, a way of looking at the world, a way of being. It's incredibly positive and wonderful in this definition. And this is the definition that I would like to all of you to participate in to the best of your abilities. And this is what you're already doing by being in this school. We can do that alone, but we do that so much better in a supportive community that's encouraging all of us in this. And by doing this, we can solve our own problems, little and small, and the big problems facing us in the world. And indeed, everything can be hacked. Of course, electronics and computers, which is really fun, and that's my favorite thing, tools to hack, but we can also do anything: art, craft, science, biology, ourselves. We ourselves are a lifelong project that needs constant improvement, and we can hack that for making ourselves better, and the people around us and our communities always need constant improvement to make them better. And indeed, the planet needs improvement. And if we don't do that, who will? Everything can and should be hacked, including tools. We continually create tools that are cool, that we share with others, that we learn from, that make our lives better, that make our lives easier. And if we do that in community, we create tools for our community to make use of, to do all the cool things we do, especially in hackerspaces where we're constantly teaching and learning and sharing together. But in community in general, in schools where the community can happen, technology, whatever it is tools, and we can create all those tools in all these different ways, regardless of what it is, to make music, to make science, to make food, biology, whatever. These are the tools we make to try to make our lives better and easier. But those tools are put into the cultural context. If the cultural context we create is positive, those tools will be used to the best of the ability of the people within that cultural context. If the cultural context is not so positive, if it's negative, they will be used in a way for that negativity. Part of our cultural context is capitalism. And there's pluses and minuses to everything, including capitalism. But if you think about capitalism, and I'll give you the way I think about it, it is absurd. It is all about these pieces of paper with numbers in the corner, or nowadays, numbers on a screen. If your number on a screen is not big enough, you cannot buy food, you can't eat. If your number on the screen is not big enough, you don't have a place to live. This is absurd. So in order to get that number big enough on a screen, most people think of getting a job. Whether or not they like that job, if they get a job, most people feel that they're lucky to have a job that's meaningless just to get their number on a screen big enough so that they can eat and have a place to live. This sucks. This absolutely sucks. This is not the world I signed up to live in. Actually, I didn't sign up for anything. I was just born. But anyways, while we're here, we can try to make things better. Having a job is just one possibility. Another possibility is to create work that you love. That's what I did. And I love my job. I turn TVs off for a living. And I love my job. Me and 12 of my friends have made a living since 2004 with this project that we find meaningful, that we love. And that's possible. And I encourage all of you to explore that possibility because it is possible. Here's another question. Is technology neutral? A lot of people say it is. What do you think? Is it neutral? Well, I have my answer, and I'll give you my answer with some examples. Everyone's used one of these probably. Everyone knows what it is. It's a hammer. When we think of a hammer, we think of pounding nails into something, probably wood. And that's what it's best used for. It was created for a cultural context of pounding nails into wood. And because of that cultural context, that's what it's almost always used for. It's really good at it. So we keep using it for that. And it reinforces the cultural context. You might wonder what I'm doing here. This is a cat that ran away. So, but a hammer can be used for other things. You can bonk someone on the head with a hammer and kill that person. But that's not what it's best used for in our cultural context, so it's not used for that very often. Here's another piece of technology. In our cultural context, that can be used as a hammer to pound nails into wood, but that's not what it's best used for in our cultural context. What it's best used for in our cultural context is killing, usually people. And that's what it's almost always used for, especially in my country. Although I now live in Berlin, Germany, partly for that reason. Here's another piece of technology. And here's another one. I've worked for a lot of small companies, like I mentioned earlier, helping them with their problems. And in all of them, the military has come along and wanted to make use of our creative output. All of them, every single one. These are just a few. My first job was with a computer game company. This was 1978, so we were using Apple II computers. My favorite thing that Apple ever made. And we made a cool little game, and the military came along after I put a whole summer of my life into this and said, hey, nice game you got there. How about if you do a little custom work for us and make it into a killer helicopter training simulator? And the bosses said, hell yeah, we'll make a lot of money and we'll do that for you. And I couldn't see myself using my life and energy to do that, so I quit that job. A couple years later, I was working for a cool little company that made museum exhibits, including some way wonderful ones like the Holocaust Museum. And there were no video cards back then, so we had to make our own video generator, which is what I did. And then the military came along and said, hey, nice video graphics generator you got there. How about selling it to us so we can use it to market our weapon systems to Congress? And the bosses said, hell yeah, we'll make a lot of money, so we'll do that. And then I couldn't see myself using my time and life and energy for that, so I quit that job. A few years later, I worked for the company where we created the first virtual reality systems. We even coined the term virtual reality, and all of us knew that we would never sell to the military. But we did sell to the University of Central Florida, to a lab there that was actually a military lab that we didn't know about. And they gave it to the military, who used our system, one that I spent 3 months of my life creating custom for the University of Central Florida. And they used it for a World War III training simulator. I could not see working on VR ever again after that, and I haven't. And as I mentioned, I started my own company in 1997. As often happens, if you have investors, and this is when I learned not to have investors, and I encourage all of you not to have venture capitalists, VCs, vulture capitalists, as they're often called, for good reasons. They took over and they hired a guy, a sales guy, with this express intent of selling our storage controllers to the NSA, the Secret Service of the United States of America. And back then, we could only guess what they would use it for. Now, since Snowden, we know what they use it for. And that's when I quit the company that I started. In 2004, I started my own company to make TV Begone remote controls that turn TVs off in public places. And as it turns out, there's no military application for turning TVs off. But if the military did come along, and no matter how much money they offered me, I would tell them very politely to fuck off. This is the cultural context that we live in, especially in the US, where the military is a huge part of the economy. But the cultural context determines how things will be used. For instance, toilets, another example, can be used for all sorts of things. But in our cultural context, what they're best used for is peeing and pooping. TVs can be used for bookshelves, or at least old TVs can. They can also be used for static information like a schedule in an airport or a train station. But what they're best used for in our cultural context, and what they are used for, is to manipulate us to buy stuff we don't want or need, whether it's dish soap or politicians. That's what we're manipulated into buying through this medium. And with social media, so-called social media, it's even more powerful way of getting us to buy stuff we don't want or need. It can be used for joy and warmth and fuzziness, but what it's best used for is addiction, which is what they're designed for, so that they'll make more money. And they make the most money when we're most engaged. And the most engaging thing that they do and they promote is outrage and anger through fake news and all sorts of other ways. And again, manipulating us into buying things we don't want or need, whether it's dish soap or a politician. The cultural context for all of this as well, again, is military, especially the US, where the military is 6 times the amount of the rest of the world put together. And it's the world's biggest military bully. And it's the world's biggest economic bully as well. And this is the single biggest polluter in the world, the US military. And it's also the single biggest element of the US economy. And it drives so much. I never thought it would have hit the maker fairs, which I volunteered for free for years of my life, putting my heart and soul into teaching people how to solder, how to make cool things with electronics for years. And it grew from small to medium to huge, teaching thousands of people in a weekend how to make cool things with electronics. And I loved it. It was wonderful. And after several years in 2011, I was given an award named after me, the Mitch Altman Maker Hero Award. And it was incredibly high time to receive that award in public. And it was named after me, which was even more gratifying. That's just from doing what I love, and being awarded for it was great. But as it turns out, that was the first and last Mitch Altman Maker Hero Award, because the next day, Maker Faire and Make Magazine announced publicly that they sought after and received $10 million from the US military to do cool things, to put 1,000 hackerspaces in 1,000 high schools. But the thing is, there's strings attached to money when it comes. And they were recruiting kids at Maker Fairs for the Army. They were giving keynote speeches to the military at Maker Fairs. And I knew that if I quit Maker Faire, I would feel awful. But I knew if I didn't, I would feel even worse. But when you stop doing one thing, you can start doing others. And because of that, I was invited to give my first TED Talk, this TEDx talk in Brussels in 2012. Was about hackerspaces, and because of that, it helped lots more hackerspaces form, which was very gratifying. And that started me giving lots more talks around the world. There's a bunch of other things I could talk about here, but I think I'll skip them because I'm running out of time. This is a project of mine that was open source. Everything I do is open source, everything. And it was a successful Kickstarter. I started helping this other company that took my ideas and wanted to make it even better. They call themselves Zana. But I found out after helping them for 3 months that they were wanting to sell to the Navy. They said they were doing it to help people, but it turns out they were helping people in the Navy. And not only the Navy, but the Air Force. And not only the Air Force, but the Special Boat Service. What the hell is the Special Boat Service? I don't know. I looked it up on Wikipedia and it said they can't tell us because it's too sensitive. If it's helping people, how can it be too sensitive to tell us what they're doing? And not only the Special Boat Service, but the Special Air Service and other things in the military as well, and the Ministry of, like, what the hell? This is not what I set out to do with my project, and I stopped helping them. After long, long conversations, it turned out all they wanted to do was make money by selling to the military. And, like the military, like all these corporations, exist for profit. And there's nothing wrong with profit, but if you're doing stuff for profit as a primary motive, you're doing things without regard to the other consequences, and especially corporations which exist not only for profit, but maximizing profit regardless of other consequences, which necessarily means those other consequences will be really bad. If a corporation will make more money polluting than not polluting, they will pollute. In the 70s, the Ford Corporation saw they would make more money by not fixing a car that exploded when it was rear-ended. It was cheaper to pay off the dead people's family. Here's the cat. Cats provide perfect perspective for all these things. So the Ford Corporation did what made more money, not what made more sense. And genetically modified foods may or may not be safe, but we don't even know because we don't know the long-term effects. But corporations make more money without looking into that, so they do it. The military makes more money regardless of how many people they kill or destroy or spy upon, so they do that. Corporations sell to them because it makes more money for them. Corporations buy politicians, especially in the US, because they'll in turn make laws to maximize profits. The military, again, is the biggest polluter. It's the biggest element of the US economy, and it drives a lot of this. They get a huge return on their investment by buying politicians and paying for their elections. What do we do in the face of this? Well, we have to think about the ethics. We have to. We have responsibility. It's cool to play with tech. It's way cool. But if we do it without thinking of the consequences, we're responsible for what happens, even if it's not intended. There's no right and wrong answers. We can't be perfect. We have to think about it. We also have to think about where our money comes from to fund our projects. There's always strings attached. Even if we get money from the coolest person in the world, we're thinking about what they want and what they think is cool and what they think isn't, and that might change what we do. There's always strings attached. That might not be bad. If the person or organization aligns with our values, maybe we're making the world better by accepting their money. But if that organization definitely we know does not align with our values, then we're helping them with the values that don't align with ours by accepting their money. Here's another question. Where do you draw the line? There's no right and wrong answer, but we have to think about this. We have to think about it and determine where is okay and where is not okay, what's okay to do, what money's okay to accept, what isn't. And we have to keep re-evaluating this over our lives because we change, the world changing, context changes. For me, being a US citizen, it's required that I pay taxes. I pay everything that's required and no penny more. I don't do anything for the military directly or indirectly. But where do you draw the line? A lot of people who are entrepreneurial create startups to make money. That's their prime objective. And if they do that, they're going to start a startup which is incredibly stupid. Please don't do that. Create a startup that's meaningful. If you do it just for money, you're going to do stuff that's really stupid, and there are a lot of horrible consequences to that. I'm going to skip a bunch of these, but IoT can be a lot of cool things, but it's mostly there to make money, and so in the cultural context, it turns into something that spies on us. And all these things that people put in their apartments that spy on them voluntarily 24 hours a day, recording everything they say and do, or IoT that has no concern for the security and puts out huge parts of the internet when people use it maliciously because there's a hard-coded password in the chip that the IoT devices use. And this is the kind of the stuff that we're going to put in a pacemaker kind of thing in our body. Give me a break. So anyways, and this guy wants us to put IoT implants in our brain. I don't see him putting an implant in his brain. He wants to do it in our brain. Why doesn't he go to Mars, which is what he wants us to do? Anyways, this won't end well. We need to create a more positive context to do that. And again, in community is how we can do that. And entrepreneurship is how I'm going to end this talk. We don't start, if you're going to be a good entrepreneur, you don't start with money, because if you start with that, you probably won't make it. Like almost all startups, it will fail. The only chance you have of succeeding is if you start with finding something meaningful for you. If it's meaningful for you, maybe it's meaningful for others. And if it's meaningful for others, that is exactly what they will pay you to provide them. You have to do it in this order. And again, this is my thing, but this is very, very emphatic that I want to encourage you to think about. Think about making time to explore what's meaningful for you. and then try things, and then see what works and what doesn't. We're going to fail a lot. When you try things, it'll fail, but you'll learn from that. And you learn much, much more from your failures than your successes, because we all fail way more often than we succeed. But we'll learn from what works and what doesn't work as well. And we repeat, we keep trying, we keep seeing what works, what doesn't, what we enjoy, what's meaningful. Eventually we find a project that we love, that has a possibility for doing cool things. It's meaningful for us. It's meaningful for the community around us, that is encouraging us to continue. It's meaningful for other people around us. And now you have something that people will pay you to do, and you have some startup that has a possibility of success. And now you can put your entrepreneurial and creative efforts into something that's worth putting into the world, that will provide meaning to you, the people around you, and other people, and make the world a better place. Our companies don't need to grow. There's already one too many Apple and one too many Google. We don't need another one. If our thing is popular and we can provide it to more people to make their lives better and they want it, cool, we can grow, but we don't need to. Growth is not always good. What's better is to create a company that provides something meaningful, that's meaningful to you, to the people around you, and doesn't necessarily grow. Like my small company, since 2004 has not grown, but it's made a living for me and 12 of my friends. What if you had a company like that, or worked for a company like that? What if each one of you did that? I would love to see eventually all of you working for or starting a company like this. What if everyone in Lyon had that? What if everyone in France, in Europe? What if everyone in the world did? Or if some significant percentage did this? The world would be such an incredibly better place. We can share our skills with everyone, old and young. We can explore and find things that are meaningful. We can try new things to try to solve problems, small and big. But one last question before I end, because it's important. What is success? We need to, because that's what we're all going for. And if we don't think about it, we're going for stuff we've never thought about. And then we're doing things which have way unintended consequences. What's success? Is it that? No, it's not that. That's a pile of money. You can do cool things with money, but it's not success. It's only money. And if you spend more time making money than you need, then you are wasting your time. Don't do that. Do something meaningful. What if you can do what you love, and in doing what you love, make enough to keep doing it? What more do you need than that? If you did that, your life would be wonderful. But what exactly would that be to you? That's up to you to find out. It's up to each of us to choose what we do. That creates our future. The future is up to us by the choices we make. Little ones, big ones. If we wait for our leaders to make those choices, we will all be dead. We're all going to be dead anyways, but while we're alive is when we have the opportunity to make choices, to make our lives better, to make the lives of those around us better, and make the world better. Here again is my contact information. Please feel free to contact me anytime for any reason. And thanks for listening to me rant.